Hi, everyone. It's Joe Veneri, the host of Fitt Insider, the show where I talk with the entrepreneurs, executives, and investors who are redefining the business of fitness and wellness. Hey, everyone. It's Joe Veneri, the host of Fitt Insider. Today, I'm joined by Lisa Blau. Lisa is a co-founder at Able Partners. On today's episode, we talk to Lisa about the boundless nature of the wellness industry, how startups can find success by breaking down long-held stigmas, and the importance of building a strong brand. I had a great time chatting with Lisa, and I hope you enjoy listening. Let's get into it. Lisa, thanks so much for joining us today. We're excited to chat.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Great. And just kind of jumping right into it, can you give us the backstory of Able Partners and kind of how you got to where you are today?
Sure. Well, Amanda and I had both been investing in the wellness space individually for, well over a decade. And about 3 years ago, when we started to see just the growth in the category really explode, we decided to pool our capital and form Able. I had been an entrepreneur in the wellness space, in the digital media content space with an email newsletter called Vital Juice, and sort of saw what was happening on the ground in local markets with more consumers prioritizing wellness and fitness. And then when I shifted over to investing after I exited that business, just was really laser focused on the category. So Amanda had a background in private equity and had also been active in the space. And we decided to join forces and really focus on supporting early stage entrepreneurs in what we define as the positive living lifestyle space. So those are brands that are helping the consumer live a healthier, happier, more meaningful life. And we try to support them as early as possible, pre-seed through Series A, with our sweet spot probably being seed. So that's a bit about Able.
Yeah, absolutely. And digging into that a little bit further with the positive living space, you mentioned that it's companies that are helping consumers live a healthier, more vibrant life, if you will. Can you dig into that a little bit more and kind of what constitutes positive living and where are the bounds, if there are any?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm not sure there are bounds. And it's one reason why we prefer to use positive living versus wellness. I think wellness probably has a little more of defined boundaries around it. And I think the core of where our portfolio started is more traditional wellness. Brands like Four Sigmatic, Daily Harvest, Moon Juice, Bulletproof. These are sort of those ingestible CPG products that we're helping consumers, give them a promise of wellness by consuming these products. And as Amanda and I spent more time looking at the space, we really wanted to take a much broader view because we think you can come at improving the consumer's life from a bunch of different angles. So, we have a whole thesis around community and inclusion. And I think you see there are investments in the wing and chief. We have a deep commitment to mental health and mental wellness. And we've come at that a whole bunch of different ways. Alma being one of our investments there. We've made investments in the psilocybin space, and we're constantly talking to entrepreneurs who are innovating to help break the stigma around mental health and mental wellness. I think stigmas is also like a big part of our thesis. We're very interested in what happens when you can break apart a stigma or have a stigma splinter. There's these shards of opportunity. So, we put mental health and mental well-being within that stigma. We put aging women's health in that stigma. Lots of attention focused on women at a certain stage in their life, and then they're sort of forgotten and overlooked. And that broadly relates into the kind of elder care market. We're also interested in caretaking broadly on the elderly side as well as on the childcare side. But that gives you a sense for, we really take a broad macro view of, are there ways to improve the consumer's life, in all aspects, in the home, in the office, in their personal lives.
Definitely a very boundless category as you started to go into the various components and aspects of that. Mm-hmm. And with that, some of the things that you mentioned, mental health, psychedelics, there's even an investment in astrology. I think it's Sanctuary that you all made. Do you think those things, as you're looking at these these categories that are defined, whether it's as wellness or as positive living, as you put it, that they have the potential to be more mainstream than they are now? Or do you think that they will continue to be kind of a fringe idea that attracts a very specific audience, or is it, targeting a larger consumer base?
Look, I think things like sanctuary, which is astrology, it has a really big market. I think you see that coming into play with millennials as their affiliation with churches decreases, their anxiety and stress levels increase. They're looking for alternate sources to play the role that I think church and community used to play in a lot of people's lives. And so I think astrology, people are using these apps really as therapy tools. And so that was our thesis there, is like, people are going to go to these as a tool for self-improvement. So can we participate in that? Because that's a positive impact on the consumer if they're not getting it elsewhere. So that's kind of, I think, to one answer, which is a very different category than the psychedelics piece. I do think psychedelics can have a much bigger impact. Would I say that it would go mainstream? No, I don't think it should go mainstream in the sense that this is nothing that should ever be direct to consumer. It'd have to be highly regulated. But there is a lot of, profound research suggesting that it can have a positive impact on people suffering from treatment-resistant depression, eating disorders, alcoholism, PTSD, these conditions that pharmaceutical companies have spent tremendous amount of dollars trying to find, effective medicines. And for those consumers where those medicines aren't having strong results, or sometimes in concert with those pharmaceuticals, we're seeing really great results with psilocybin. So I think that would be more contained. It would be regulated. You'd see that being administered in clinics and in hospitals, but bringing that into people's lives, I think it's worth pursuing and exploring and allowing more research to happen, because we may have these tools that are there that could be quite effective. And what we know for sure that the data suggests is that the country is more stressed out, more anxious, suffering from more mental health and mental disease than ever in the history of the country. And there's probably a whole bunch of different reasons for that. We can try to attack the reasons, and we can also try to develop solutions. And so we hope that our dollars there will have meaningful impact, but I view that quite differently than I view an investment in Sanctuary, which is, an app and a tool that a consumer can have in a much more informal, low stakes way and feel better about themselves after that interaction.
Right. And I would definitely agree. There's kind of drawing the lines between those various tools, and even you mentioned some of the ingestibles and CPG brands, and then some things like the mental health and the psychedelics, which have potentially a much more research and science-backed methodologies behind them. As these various components of positive living start to blur the lines between what is science and what is wellness and what is positive living, do you think it's important to differentiate between those, or just say that if it's helping somebody improve their life, then it's helping them, and we don't really have to define them beyond that?
I guess that I would put a question back at you. Is that define it as an investor? Is who needs that definition? I think for us as a small and nimble captive fund, we benefit from not having to make those definitions, because if our priority is to make investments that are going to have a positive impact on the consumer's life, we can just do that across categories. I think if you're, talking to a more traditional institutional investor, that's why they don't have the ability at this stage in the game to make some of these investments that we're making, because they do need more of those definitions. So I think it sort of depends on who's asking.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's important as well. And I think as you start to go down that path, it's almost from an entrepreneur or investor perspective, what responsibility do they have to market and make claims about certain products without potentially that research or validation? And then on the flip side of that, it's where is it a matter of kind of buyer beware from a consumer perspective, recognizing that, these products with a great brand and an incredible mission and wanting to do the right things, that it may not be medicine, science backed, but it may be contributing to helping you live a healthier lifestyle. So I think it's, in this context, it's almost, in given the audience that we're speaking to, from an entrepreneur's and an investor's perspective, is there responsibility to ensure the consumer knows what they're getting into, or is it just a matter of building a great brand, building the best product that they can to fulfill that healthy living mission?
I think it's really both. You have to try to build to fill promise they're trying to sell to the consumer, but they have to do that responsibly. And I think, there are, in all instances, there's sort of a sliding scale of government regulation and involvement, and whether it's an ingestible that you might be able to buy off the shelf at Sephora, the consumer needs to read the language carefully. The brand needs to be really thoughtful about the kind of language that they're putting on the label, the kind of promise they're making to people. If you go to the other end of the spectrum, where it might be, a trial for an experience that might help someone with treatment-resistant depression, clearly there needs to be a tremendous amount of thought, regulation, and medical attention that goes into that. So, I think for us at Able, we're always, very mindful of how the brand is communicating to the consumer. And we haven't invested in anybody that I feel, has overpromised or underdelivered. And I think in instances where that has surfaced, I think brands have been responsive, and taken actions to show that they're putting checks and balances in place to make sure that they're communicating in a healthy and responsible way with their consumer.
Definitely. And that piece, when you start to look at not only the lifestyle brands, but specifically the positive living brands that you've invested in, it looks like that piece of having a strong brand, of having that identity, of having that mission is very important among those companies. Can you kind of speak to what it means to have that element of brand? And certainly a lot of these, another commonality is community, in addition to the health and positive living mission. So how important is brand and community to the investments that you're making?
I think it's very important because we're coming in so early, right? So we'll come in pre-seed, pre-revenue when the brand is just an idea on paper. And really, there's no data at that point. You can make investments based on your understanding of a particular slice of the market, but you also have to have, obviously, like a really strong team that you believe in, and a team that can, be quite effective at building a powerful brand and a community around that brand, because that's how the game is played at this stage. And in this kind of landscape of, digital and social media, I think brand is everything. So it's very important.
And given that, in addition to the brand and the fact that you're making investments at such an early stage, what other elements are you looking for from, whether it's the company or the entrepreneur, to signify to you, yeah, this is something that we would want to, take a chance on and make an investment in?
Well, first and foremost, and this is not such an original response, but it's very true. It's really very much about the entrepreneur and the founder. And then it becomes about the actual opportunity and the market size, the competitive landscape, and, any viewpoint that we specifically have on that particular slice of the market and category. And then, becomes a little bit more about like team. And then for us, how effective can we be at helping this business, grow exponentially in these early stages of their life.
And what does that typically look like when you talk about helping the companies grow? Or do you tend to be hands-on as an investor, or is it depend company by company? What does that involvement look like?
It varies. I think that we like to be helpful. We've both been entrepreneurs, so we never want to be burdensome. We're investing quite early, so often there aren't formal boards in place, but I think we take, sort of very active advisory roles. And we want to essentially remove roadblocks, from their path and help open doors. And so we try to think effectively about, how our networks can do that, whether it's simply doing a call with another entrepreneur or a category expert to help them think through, strategy on sourcing and product development, or getting perspective on, from another brand that's had a successful relationship with a key retailer, like how do we put that playbook together, making the introductions directly to all the retailers that are, key from a signaling perspective early on, and then, key from a growth in number of doors. We make relationships and introductions on the branding and marketing side. So a whole host of different ways.
And kind of sticking on that idea of the entrepreneur, you said you focused on betting on the entrepreneur and the person, as well as a number of other factors. Is there any advice that you would offer an entrepreneur who wants to or believes that they have a concept in the wellness or positive living space, maybe from potentially pitfalls of other companies or the successes of other companies that you've started and worked with? Advice you would have for a wellness entrepreneur?
Advice centered around like how to raise money or how to launch a product, or
yeah, I think in this case the most beneficial part would be how would they even go about getting on the radar of someone like yourself? I mean, obviously in terms of how investment works, it's very much based on referrals and who knows who and getting into that network. But assuming that they were able to do that, and you're kind of they're sitting down with someone like yourself and they're going through that fundraising process, what is it kind of takeaways that they might have, advice that you might have for them around them starting this company, raising funds, and then going about, having achieved that benchmark, moving on from there?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, it is very relationship driven. Warm introductions are always most effective, but we have definitely taken, cold introductions and I'm a big believer in trying to support people that are outside of the network, because it is a very network driven business. So, I think cold emails, really researching the investors, understanding, looking at the cap tables and the fundraising history of brands that are either, similar or, broadly in your category, brands that you admire. I think that's a really great place to start, of being very thoughtful about the investors that you're approaching. And then, it's all about follow up, managing the relationship. Some of it is sort of reading, cues of interest. And then, I think it's critical to kind of get that lead in place. The lead sets the tone and can bring others in. I mean, we often, while we have not historically led, we do bring a lot of other investors into the table when we like deals. So, I think thinking through those dynamics is important, and maintaining those relationships and conversations, giving yourself a process to manage your fundraising process, I think is critical, because it's, obviously a huge time sink, and you're in the early stages of a business trying to get it off the ground, and things can slip through the cracks. But good follow-up really counts for something, and can also save you time to clean out people from your pipeline that actually aren't interested, so you don't waste time and you can stay focused on the conversations that might prove out to be most fruitful.
Right. And simply trying to manage that entire process of raising funds while still trying to raise the company and maintain the trajectory is certainly a challenge. And I think all those things, little tips, would be welcomed amongst the audience. Kind of changing the gears a little bit from focusing on the entrepreneurs specifically to the broader wellness industry. A few things we've touched on so far, again, the mental health, you even mentioned elder care, certainly psychedelics. In addition to those things, are there white space that you see a huge opportunity, or if not a white space, industries or maybe areas that you are excited to see companies start to delve into or wanting to see companies delve into in terms of potentially what's next for the wellness industry?
Sure. I think I touched on this a little bit earlier, and it, relates to elder care, but I really view this differently as specifically focusing on the aging woman. We think menopause and a whole host of products, services, community technology for women kind of 50 plus, including food and nutrition, is a total white space. There's no one really talking to her. She's kind of grown up and aged with a more sophisticated portfolio of brands that have been a part of her life. And we think there's opportunity to go in there. We are seeing early days of innovation. So I think this is an area to stay focused on and continue to look at. Again, I think mental health, I just think that's not going away, and we'll continue to see more creative ways of innovating there. But we've had this whole conversation around stigmas, and we saw a makeup business focused on Gen Z men, and this is for across the kind of gender spectrum, and regardless of how they identify in terms of their sexuality, Gen Z men are interested and open to wearing concealer and improving their self-image. And we've seen 2 or 3 brands innovating in that space. So this idea of looking at categories that previously just seemed like not even up for discussion, we're seeing a lot of innovation there.
And I think that's certainly back to the conversation around what is or isn't wellness and who is defining that. In this case, certainly men's concealer and personal care and makeup, as gender norms shift and you start to see the breakdown of, like you touched on, the stigmas, there's so much more opportunity. And in addition to that, there's the conversation around, sexual health and wellness that's starting to emerge, what opportunities exist there. Additionally, more recently, you've seen stigma breaking down around direct-to-consumer prescription hair loss pills, the Hims and Roman and Keeps of the world that are creating those opportunities. One thing I wanted to circle back on was you mentioned starting to target the 50 plus woman. It was actually Ritual recently announced that they're going to do a kind of senior formula vitamin for their women's line of vitamins. So you're already starting to see some of those things emerge.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we'll just continue to see that both from some of the, sort of existing players who have innovated already over the last 5 years. And then I think we'll see a lot of new brands coming in to really try to tackle the space.
Do you think that's a matter of, certainly there's an opportunity for new brands to enter the space, but will we see kind of consolidation or a roll up in these different companies, potentially a holding company that's doing a variety of different things across these markets? Or do you expect that it's more something where it's the innovation and upstarts who are breaking into these new markets?
I think we're going to continue to see a lot of innovation and upstart. And then I think we'll see potentially shorter timelines to acquisition by some of the existing large CPG incumbents where innovation has historically been harder for them to do internally, and they innovate through acquisition. I think maybe the exits will be a little more rational, less holding out for hitting a certain high bar number, and I think you'll see more partnership on innovation from the existing incumbents with, sort of nimble funds and incubators like Able and others, where they might, co-invest to incubate some of these brands. And then, you'd see those brands sort of grow into the fold of a larger holding company.
Is that a consideration for you and Able, is doing more of the incubation accelerator based approach as opposed to just investing in the early seed rounds?
I think we're always we've always thought about and considered. And I think in specific areas of interest where we see real white space, we would entertain that. So it's something that we're always open to. And I think you can see there are other funds who are doing that actively.
Yeah, there's definitely the venture studio approach, where folks are starting the companies from within and staffing them and scaling them from within in some cases.
Right.
And go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say there's like Human Ventures is doing that. M13 is doing that. I think there's a few folks out there who are both leveraging on the fund side their expertise and networks around hiring, and then partnering with capital partners that have real domain expertise but have trouble attracting that kind of young innovative talent to bring fresh thinking into the category. So I think we'll see more of that in these categories that interest us, at least at Able.
Yeah, and this, I know we're kind of running out of time here. I want to be mindful of that. So down that path of, potential opportunities and what's next for Able Partners, what is it looking ahead that you're hoping to achieve over the next few years as you kind of continue down the path of the positive living and the wellness focused investments?
For us, it's really about finding great investments, making great returns, and helping consumers lead better lives in that process. I think, you can invest for a great economic return and still have that be something that leaves people feeling better, being happier, and living more meaningful lives. And, that's everything that we're focused on.
Absolutely. That's incredible. And I certainly agree that the opportunity to not only support these entrepreneurs in the mission to live better, but in this case, and it certainly sounds like this is what you've been able to achieve at Able, is that helping define the category, what it is now, what's potential, what it has the potential to be, and certainly helping shape that over the next few years.
Absolutely. That is right. We've been in the category, I think, long before there was broader interest, and we'll continue to be, thought leaders trying to identify the best areas of opportunity for investment and innovation going forward.
That's awesome. It's been great to kind of get those insights and hear the whole story, and certainly excited to see both what's next for you at Able and how that translates into what's next for the positive living space and wellness industry at large.
Well, thank you so much. It's been great to talk with you. Thanks for having me.
Likewise. Thank you. Thanks everyone for listening to today's episode. For more from Fitt Insider, visit insider.fit.co and subscribe to our weekly newsletter for insights and analysis on the business of fitness and wellness. Then go ahead and subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. See you next time.